Hi, I'm Faith Erin Hicks, creator of Ride On, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Faith Erin Hicks about her new graphic novel, Ride On. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. Faith is a writer and artist living in Vancouver, British Columbia. Her published works include The Adventures of Superhero Girl, Friends with Boys, The Nameless City Trilogy, 1 Year at Ellesmere, and the young adult novel Comics Will Break Your Heart. Faith has won 2 Eisner Awards for The Adventures of Superhero Girl and The Divided Earth, the third book in the Nameless City trilogy. In 2019, she collaborated with the best-selling author Rainbow Rowell and drew Pumpkinheads, which was a New York Times bestseller. Her current graphic novel is Ride On, inspired by Faith's childhood love of horses. It is now available from First Second Books. Ride On is a story of 12-year-old Victoria, who has always loved horses. But riding in competitions is high stakes, high stress, and shockingly expensive. Even though Victoria's best friend Taylor loves competing, Victoria has lost her taste for it. And after a heartbreaking fight with Taylor, Victoria needs a new start. At a new stables. A place where she doesn't have to worry about anything other than riding. No competition, no drama, no friends. Just horses. Edgewood Stables seems ideal. There are plenty of horses to ride, and Victoria is perfectly happy giving the other riders the cold shoulder. But can she truly be happy with no friends? And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Faith Erin Hicks about her new graphic novel, Ride On. So, Faith Erin Hicks, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your time. Before we get started, though, I want to ask you, what was the first comic book that you read?
I feel like the first comics that I read were probably newspaper comics. I really enjoyed, cracking up my parents' newspaper and reading. I really liked Calvin and Hobbes. I really liked For Better, For Worse. That one was great. I loved following the storylines. And then I feel like probably the first non-newspaper comics I read were probably Tintin and Asterix. Growing up Canadian, those are 2 comics that are, I feel like, very much a part of our culture. So yeah, I absolutely loved those comics and read them for many, many years.
Yeah, good stuff there, for sure. Good for reading when you're growing up. But I'm wondering, who or what inspires you to create today, though?
Well, I have 3 creators who are the ones who I feel like have influenced me the most. The first is Jeff Smith, creator of Bone. And I found his comics, I must have been in my early 20s, so, kind of older. But at the time, I knew I really enjoyed comics. I knew I really enjoyed the medium of comics, but I feel like there was not a lot of comics. This probably would have been late 90s. But I felt like there was not a lot of comics being written and drawn with me as a young woman wanting to read comics. Not very many comics made with me as a reader in mind. And then I found Bone. It just sort of blew my mind. It was everything I wanted as a creator, as someone who really loved fantasy, who really loved adventure, who really wanted to see amazing female characters in comics. Bone was definitely the one that sort of opened my eyes, and I saw what comics could be. So I was really, really excited when I first found that comic. And then later on, I found 2 manga artists. The first is Naoki Urasawa. He is the creator of comics like Monster, 20th Century Boys, Pluto, Master Keaton. A bunch of his comics are available in English. And he really blew my mind, too. I feel like he was a creator who really knew how to decompress on the page. And that was something that was very influential in my own work. Just seeing him draw out a scene and make it all about emotional impact and sort of the pacing on the page. So he was really amazing. And then my final major influence was Hiromu Arakawa, who is the creator of Fullmetal Alchemist, which is this amazing, just absolutely amazing action comic. And I don't know, she just she's a master at drawing fight scenes and writing characters that you just absolutely love and root for, and that's had a huge impact on my own work as well. So those three creators, I would say, have had the largest impact on me as a creator.
Great. Good stuff. Well, speaking about creating, let's talk about your latest graphic novel, Ride On. I wonder if you could talk a wee bit about the story and what inspired you to create it.
Yeah, for sure. Ride On is a little bit inspired by my childhood experiences as a horse girl. I was really into horses for a huge period of both my childhood and my teenage years. I rode for many, many years. I longed to have my own horse. Unfortunately, it was not in the cards. So Ride On follows the story of a young rider, Victoria, who is a lot like I was at that age. She's about 12 years old. She's obsessed with horses, has ridden her entire life, and horses are like her great passion. But then she starts to be drawn to other things, and she gains other interests in her life. Specifically, she gains an interest in a science fiction show called Beyond the Galaxy. And as a result of her widening interests and the change in her life, she ends up basically having a huge fight with her horse girl best friend, Taylor. And then that calamity basically forces Victoria to go out and seek other friends and ride at another stable. And that part too is also a little bit inspired by my own life. You know, as I mentioned, I was a horse girl. I was obsessed with horses for such a long period of time, and it was very much a part of my identity. And then when I got a little bit older, I started getting interested in things like science fiction and fantasy and writing and drawing. It was kind of like that shift going from being a horse girl and having that be my entire identity to something different and something maybe a little more complicated was really challenging for me as a kid growing up. So yeah, there's a science fiction TV show in the book that's a very thinly veiled analogy for Star Trek, which was, you know, my great love as a teen growing up, as a nerdy teen growing up. And I still love it very much. So yeah, I think of this story as like Horse Girl meets Star Trek.
Ah, okay. So you're a TNG fan then?
That was my original show. You know, I knew about the original series with Kirk and his motley gang, but TNG was really the one that resonated with me. My very first adolescent crush was on Data. I loved him so much. I still love him. I think he's still just a great character. And, you know, some of my favorite TNG episodes are the ones focused on Data. You know, now it's like I've watched through all the shows. You know, I've watched through Deep Space Nine. I've watched through Voyager, Enterprise. And I don't know, it always comes down to between Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, because I don't know, there's things that Deep Space Nine I think does really, really well. And as a continuing story, I actually think it's better than Next Generation. Yeah, Next Generation was my first love, so.
So I got to get your reaction to the Picard Season 3 teaser that came out at San Diego Comic-Con. What did you think of that?
That was really cool, but I gotta be honest, I decided that I didn't want to watch Picard.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't hear great things, and then I don't know, it's like I love Next Generation so much, and the thought of maybe the show going in a direction that I was uncomfortable with, you know, I just didn't, I don't know, it just didn't appeal to me.
Oh, I get it.
So yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things where it's like, it felt like it wasn't necessarily for me as a Star Trek person, so that's fine. Yeah. But I am really enjoying Lower Decks, the animated show. I think it is wonderful. It's so much fun, and it's actually animated here in Vancouver. So I have friends who work on it.
Very good. Good. Well, getting back to your story of Ride On, in an interview with comicbook.com, you had mentioned that you had wanted to get back to horse riding, but the pandemic put that on hold. But now that we're sort of slowly getting out of the pandemic, have you considered restarting riding horses?
Are we slowly getting out of the pandemic? At this point, I have no idea. Oh my God. Yes, I would love for the opportunity to, you know, potentially take some lessons. Unfortunately, I actually just moved. So I was living in another part of Vancouver at the beginning of 2020, and that was actually very close to some of there's like a section of the city that actually has quite a few stables. And for some reason, I don't know why that particular area has so many stables. And now I have moved very far away from that area. So my access to riding and stables is not great. So we'll see. I mean, right now I'm busy with work, so I'm not quite sure how I'm going to find the time. But
Right.
yeah, I don't know. I'd like to try. So we'll see, I guess. We'll see.
Yeah. Maybe you could do a follow-up, and that'll be part of the research. You got to
Maybe.
actually get out there and get on a horse and go, let me
Yeah.
see. If it's still the same.
I'd love to try, but unfortunately, it's a little awkward when you live in a city. And Vancouver has great public transit, but I don't have a car, so it's just a little difficult to get out to really remote areas, which is where the horses are.
Sure. Now I know on your website you've got some great content about making comics, and people can go there and check it out. But we just want to get, like, from a high level perspective, you could just walk through the tools used to create your art.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So at this point, I use a hybrid digital traditional model. So for the first part of my career, I wrote and drew comics entirely traditionally. So, I would pencil my comic book pages on giant sheets of paper and ink them with various inking tools. And then in 2014, I bought a Wacom Cintiq, which is basically a giant computer monitor that you can draw directly on. And these suckers they're huge. You can get smaller ones, but I got the big one. I got a 22-inch. And they're really expensive. But, at that point, I'd reached a stage in my career where I needed to be able to produce comic pages faster. And I thought working digitally would make me be able to draw faster. And, I think that it did. There's definitely some advantages to digital versus traditional. However, I still really enjoy inking my comic pages by hand. So what I do is I pencil all of my comics on the Cintiq in a program that it was formerly called Manga Studio, but now they've changed the name to Clip Studio. Great drawing program. It's very affordable. I think it costs like $50 Canadian. It's awesome. And that's not a rental like Photoshop. It's like you can buy it outright for $50. It's great. Mm-hmm. Highly recommend it. There's lots of brushes that you can purchase for it online. The brush pack that I use is from a website called Friendin, and they are great. So after the comic page is penciled, I print it out using, I don't know what kind of printer it is. It's just one of those like 3-in-1 printer scanner things. I think it's an Epson. Anyway, so I print out the pages on that computer, and then I ink over top of them using the same inking method that I've always used. I ink with a watercolor brush. I use a Raphael Klinsky size 1 and just a little pot of ink. I like Koh-i-Noor ink. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then when the page is done, I scan it back into the computer and send it off to my publisher for lettering and for coloring, if the book's going to be in color.
Right. I know that some people say that drawing on the computer can be very insensitive, or you don't get a feeling that in fact you've got to print out and actually do the inking to actually feel that you've got some connection to the art. You feel that?
To be honest, I'm a very messy artist. Like, I am. Like, I know some artists and it's like they draw so neatly and, their original art looks amazing, but I'm kind of, I don't know, I kind of make a mess when I draw it. So I actually really like penciling on a computer because you get, there's so many editing possibilities. Right. It's like if you're drawing on a page, traditionally, it's like even if you're drawing with, a pencil that you can erase with, sometimes, getting rid of those lines can be complicated. Whereas with digital, everything is erasable and alterable. Sure. And there's so many methods that you can use to make the process of penciling so much less onerous. But I really love inking, and to be honest, a big reason why I stayed with traditional inking is that it is not as hard on my body. Like artists we all work really long hours, and, hunching over a computer for long periods of time does, it really puts a lot of strain on your body. So sure. Just being able to move to a different setup, I think really, my body really appreciates that. So yeah, I've been able to avoid, really harming my wrist and my arm for more than a decade. And I think it's mostly due to the methods that I use.
Sure. Now your book Ride On is out, and I'm wondering how you'll be promoting it this year. Will you be attending any conventions or festivals or signings? How do you plan to get this book out and the word out about it?
We do have plans. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if all of those plans are going to come to fruition because of the pandemic. Yeah, I don't know. I was invited to Emerald City Comic-Con, and, I would love to go, but as it is now, here, we're taping this in late July. As it is now, they have no COVID protocols in place, like no masking, no proof of vaccination, and I just don't feel comfortable
Right.
going to a convention without COVID protocols. So, I'm waiting, and I'm hoping they will change their minds. And if they don't, then unfortunately I will probably have to cancel. However, we are still planning to have a book launch where is San Francisco. As it stands now, there will be a book launch at this bookstore in San Francisco, Linden Tree. Currently, the event is planned for Tuesday, August 16th at 6 p.m. And we'll see how it goes. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to do a presentation about my work and about Ride On. And then I assume there will be a signing afterwards. So, hopefully people will be available to come to that.
Sounds good. Now, speaking of conventions, at the recent San Diego Comic-Con, it was announced that you'll be on the team producing Avatar: The Last Airbender, Azula in the Spirit Temple. What can you tell us about that book?
Well, I can't tell you anything about the story because we're not allowed to talk about that quite yet.
Sure.
But this is the, how many have I done? 7th Avatar: The Last Airbender comic that I have written. So I started, when did Imbalance come out? I can't quite remember, but I did a trilogy called Imbalance in collaboration with Peter Wortman, who's my amazing artist. Mm-hmm. And that trilogy followed up the comics that Jean Yang and Guri Huru had done previously. And then Peter and I did 3 standalone graphic novels, all centered around various characters in the Avatar universe. So we had one graphic novel that was about Katara, one about Toph, and then one about Suki. And they all took place. Oh, no, wait, the Toph one didn't. But the Katara and Suki graphic novel took place during the events of the show, and the Toph story took place after the events of the show. So we really liked working in this standalone format as opposed to the trilogy format that Jean and Guri Huru pioneered. Like, I am incredibly proud of Imbalance. It was like one of the hardest things I've ever written. The reality is, like, we work hands-on with Brian Konietzko and Michael DiMartino, who are the show creators.
Right.
And, the reality is they wrote this amazing show, and we have a very high standard to live up to. Mm-hmm. So, everything that we do goes through them because, it's their show. We want to make sure that everything is authentic and true to their particular vision. So, it was just like really challenging to wrangle a giant trilogy basically into something that worked for them. So that was a huge challenge, whereas doing the smaller and shorter stories are a little more manageable and we can produce them a little more quickly. We're really excited about the new Azula story. I probably shouldn't say anything about it though. Unfortunately, it's I'm not quite sure what Dark Horse's rules are about that.
But you're excited to get back to that environment and that storytelling.
Yes, very excited to do it. I've been wanting to do an Azula story for a really long time, and this one, oh my gosh, it just like poured out of me. Like I don't even know how to describe it. It was just I was so excited to do it and just like charged right off to the story and got some really nice compliments from Michael DiMartino about it. So nice. I'm excited.
Good. Something to look forward to for sure. On a different note, though, it's been almost 10 years since you published the Eisner Award winner, The Adventures of Superhero Girl. Now, looking back on that book now, what are your thoughts? What can you say about it?
I really loved doing it. It was so much fun to write and draw. I think it came during a very particular point in my life. Like, I wrote and drew it, and it was actually published as a newspaper comic initially. I lived in Halifax, Nova Scotia at the time, and there was a free weekly newspaper there called The Coast. And basically, this newspaper wanted a comic strip to go at the back of the paper, right above the phone sex ads. And they were basically like, we will pay you this very, very small amount of money if you produce a comic strip on a weekly basis. And I was like, okay. I can do whatever I want. Great. I'll make this comic about this superhero girl. And, it's a superhero comic, but it's also a comic very much about a young person trying to figure out, the transition into adulthood. So it's like she has this passion in her life. She loves being a superhero. She has superpowers, but actually, getting that passion to transition into a job or a way to make a living is very complicated. So, I wrote and drew the comic, so long ago. I think it was like 2010 to 2012. So at the time I was much less established in my career, and I was just, really struggling. It was like, I loved drawing and I love making comics, but could I actually make this work as a job? Like I at the time I didn't know, and it was a very uncertain period in my life. So Superhero Girl was kind of about that, but then also, it was like wacky superhero hijinks and like what sort of weird villain could I make up for her to fight every week? It was a lot of fun to do. And it was also a gag strip, so like Calvin and Hobbes, like Bloom County. So that was very different from how I normally work, which is story-based comics, graphic novels. So yeah, it was really fun. I still think about her. I still really love that book. I'm very proud of it, and it's kind of nice to have a book that's like a gag comic because kids love funny comics. And, I remember once doing a talk at a school, and after the talk, one kid was like, do you have any funny comics? I was like, yeah, I have this one right here. I have Superhero Girl. Try, give that a try. See if you like it. So, yeah.
That's pretty
really
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember my daughter and I met with you, and we bought the book from you there at DCAF, the Dartmouth Comic Arts Festival. So
nice.
That's still in my memory. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah. So we've talked about Ride On. We've talked about Azula. I'm wondering, do you have any other upcoming projects that you can talk about?
Yes. So after doing Ride On, writing and drawing it over the course of 2020, and at the beginning of the pandemic, at the beginning of 2020, I was basically like, oh, well, surely this pandemic will be over with by next year. Like, surely this will be the case. And then, the beginning of 2021 rolled around, and it was very clear that the pandemic was not going away anytime soon. So I was like, well, if I'm going to be stuck at home and I'm not going to have the chance to travel and see people and do comic conventions, I may as well just pour all of my energy and my angst and frustrations over this pandemic into a new graphic novel. So I very quickly dove into something else and wrote and drew a second graphic novel over the course of the pandemic, which will also be published by First Second Books and should be out in 2023. So this one is a young adult romance, and it's about two teenagers, a girl who plays hockey and a boy who does theater and drama, and they form a friendship that, slowly evolves into romance. Currently, the title is Hockey Girl Loves Drama Boy. We will see if that actually sticks to publication. But yeah, I can't believe I wrote and drew it so quickly. Like, it's nearly 300 pages long.
Wow.
And yeah, I think it was just I was just really stuck at home in 2021 and just really frustrated about being stuck at home all the time, and didn't feel comfortable going to comic conventions, and just decided to pour all my energy into this book. And yeah, lo and behold, 300 pages later.
That's amazing. Well, something to look forward to, that's for sure.
Yeah. I hope people like it when it comes out.
Yeah. Well, with all the stuff that you have on the go, I'm wondering, do you have a website where you recommend that people go to find out about your current and your future projects?
Yeah, for sure. So I just have my portfolio site, faitherinhicks.com. I have lots of writing about how to make comics. I have artwork on there. Yeah, just various stuff about being a cartoonist and, making your living doing this. I'm pretty active on Instagram, and that's where I post, dumb comics about, video games or various feelings that I'm feeling. And then 500 photos of my cat on a daily basis. And yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me online. Sorry, I forgot to mention my Instagram name. I'm just Faith Erin Hicks on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter, but Twitter is terrifying, so I don't really post there very often.
Thanks to Faith for the chat. You can discover more about Faith on Twitter and Instagram at Faith Erin Hicks and online at faitherinhicks.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel and hit the notification button. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2022.